Hello, Coach Jason here, and today we're going to be looking at how to find checkmates. We've got a dozen examples, 12 different examples of checkmate in one, and then we're going to look at a bonus mate in two puzzle. And some of the examples include the world champion before there was a world champion, Adolf Anderssen, our current world champion, Magnus Carlsen, and then the legend himself, Paul Morphy. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, as always, we play the king on the bottom half of the board, so it's white to move here in checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about this one. So, white can checkmate in a single move, and we want to look at where the king can move. So the rook is taking away this entire file here, so of course you can't step onto that file. And then the bishop is taking away the diagonal, so he is also participating in taking away d8 square. So where can the king go? The king has two safe squares here, f8, or he can move to g8. So we have to make a move that will take away those two squares, those two green highlighted square, as well as attack the king right where he's at. There's just one move that can attack those previously green squares and the king at the same time, and that is rook to d8. Rook to d8 is checkmate. Yeah, white to play, just one single move, checkmate. Okay, again, another checkmate in one, as you see on the bottom there. So white to play and finish in a single move, and this is the Anderssen's mate. Go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about it. And checkmate in a single move. Well, we've got to look where the king can actually move here, and he actually has nowhere to go. The pawn takes away the h8 square as well as the f8 square. Kings can't be next to kill. He can't step over to f7. Of course, the rook is taking away the h7 square. Just simply make a legal move that checks the king where he's at and takes away that g8 square, that safe g8 square. So we need to attack the king where he sits, and that move is rook to h8. Rook to h8 is checkmate. But yeah, just simply moving the rook down here. White to play and checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about it. In a single move here, white to play and checkmate the black king. We wanted to look at where the king can currently move. So it looks to me like the king would be safe if he was to move to the g6 square. King is safe right where he's at. And he could also move over here to h8. So all three of those squares are safe squares, but he can't step onto the f file at all because of course the queen is breathing fire down that column. And then of course the king cannot step to h6 as the bishop would attack the king there. We need to make a move that will attack all three of those squares at the same time. So we need to be able to check the king on g8 where he is at. We need to be able to attack the h8 square as well. And we have to take away this running square to g6. One move that can do all that, and that is moving the queen to f6, checkmate. Supported by the bishop, queen checkmates, and then the rook and the pawn becoming the tail. This is another dovetail mate, so the same pattern. You can go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about this checkmate. Let's take a look at where the king can even move, if there is any space. Well, our queen is taking away this diagonal here, so the king can't step that direction. Then, of course, the rook is taking away the h file, so he can't step that way. And then the queen also is taking away the e file. So the king can't move anywhere. He's got no safe squares as it sits. There is no escape. Find a safe square to check the king and maintain our mating net around him. We have that net of squares we're covering all around him. And the only move that does this is actually going ahead and moving the queen right up to e8. Queen So in this case, the bishop kind of ends up taking away the squares that make the tail. So queen moves here, supported by the rook, and then the bishop there on d4, taking away the f6 and g7 square for the mate. White to play here, checkmate in a single move. Go ahead and pause your video if you'd like to think about it. Let's do that same thing again where we look to see where the king can currently move. So it looks like he would be safe if he stepped to e8. And it looks to be the only square because the queen is covering these two squares. And of course she's covering these two squares as well. We need to find a move that would attack the king where he sits there on e7 and also attacks those escape squares. And the only move that will do this, moving the queen to e6. Queen e6, checkmate. This is another version of the tailmate with the support of the rook. And queen e6 is checkmate. Okay, this one's called the epaulette mate. White to play and checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about it. It looks like this d7 square is okay. And of course, the king is safe on the square that he's on. The queen's got this square covered, and then of course, the rooks are blocking in the king. So we need to find a move that attacks both of those green squares at the same time. We need to find a move that attacks both d7 and e8 at the same time. The only move that does that, of course, is moving the queen to e6, would be checkmate. So it's kind of like those shoulder pads that military will wear. So just queen to e6 is game over. This is one of world champion Magnus Carlsen's games from 2004. Checkmate in a single move using that epaulette mate once again. So the same pattern as the last puzzle. You can go ahead and pause your videos if you'd like to think about it. Let's do that same thing where we look to see where the king would be safe. Well, it looks like right now he could move to e7 or he could move to e8. Those are both safe squares for him. And I believe those are the only squares as the rook is breathing fire down this direction. And of course the queen is taking away the e6 square. We just have to find a move that attacks all three of these squares here, highlighted in green. So those two, e7, e8, and of course we have to check the king at the same time. The only move that would do that is the one that, I don't know if Magnus Carlsen actually got a chance to play this move, or if the Grandmaster he was playing resigned prior to the move. Yeah, but simply queen to d7 is game over. Okay, white to play, checkmate, single move. You can go ahead and pause your video if you want to think about it. Well, where can the king move in this case? There's actually nowhere that the king can move. c4 pawn here is taking away both d5 and b5. So the king can't move there, and then to have this rook breathing fire across the 7th rank. So the king is not able to move anywhere. So all we have to do is find a safe checking move, and I'm sure you found it. We would simply move our b pawn forward one square, and that is game over. Checkmate with the little one, and we would just write b5, lowercase b5, and the hashtag for checkmate. Yeah, we can just simply move this pawn up, and that is game over. Okay, here we have white to play and checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your video and think about it if you like. And let's look to see where can the king even move. There's actually no squares available for the king at this time. Pawn here on c6 is defended by the knight and is also taking away the b7 square. The knight, of course, is taking away the a6 square, and then the king is taking away all three squares in front of himself. As you see, the pawns, the black pawns are blocking him in. So all we have to do is find a checking move, a safe checking move. And as you probably surmised, pawn to a5. Just a5 would be checkmate. Yeah, in this case, we just go ahead and move the pawn up one, and that is checkmate. White to play here and checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your video and think about it if you like. Let's look to see where the king would be safe. Well, he's safe here on g7. He could move to the g7 square, and of course the king is safe where he's at. The bishop is breathing some fire down, kind of a thin fire, down this diagonal here, and then the queen breathes some powerful fire down this h-file. So we just have to find a move that takes away both of the green squares there. We have to attack the king as he sits there on g8, and we have to take away the g7 square at the same time. And there's only one move, of course, that does that, and bringing the queen down to h7 with the support of the bishop is that move. So queen h7 hashtag, so q h7 checkmate. Yeah, just with the support of the bishop, we can go ahead and move up here to h7, and that is checkmate. Again, white to move here and checkmate in a single move. You can go ahead and pause your videos and think about it if you like. In a single move, where can the king move? Well, there's really nowhere he can move. We've got the rook and the king taking away these two squares on the f-file. We've got this rook taking away the e2 square. King cannot take the rook there on d2, as that rook is defended by the knight. This rook here on d2 takes away the d1 square. So all we have to do is find a checking move that is safe and maintains those squares around the king. Yeah, we've got the support. So the rook is guarded, so we can just kind of do like a ladder mate here. Pretty cool. White to play here and checkmate in a single move. Go ahead and pause your video, think about it if you like. Move. What squares are safe? Well, we do have some squares where the king could possibly find a respite. Both the d7 square and the e8 square are safe. So whatever attack we're going to do, we would have to take those squares away at the same time as attacking the king where he sits there on e7. So we need to attack all three squares at the same time. The only move that does that, of course, is attacking the f7 square with our queen. Defended by the bishop, a queen and helper mate that would also attack those three green squares we had back there. So we'd write capital Q, lowercase x for capture on lowercase f7, and then of course the hashtag for checkmate. But we've got two attackers on this rook here, the queen and bishop both attacking, only the king defending, so we can go ahead and capture, and there is no escape for the black king. As promised, we have a checkmate in two moves. This is our final example for the day, but it is black to play and checkmate in two moves. Go ahead and pause your video if you want to take the time to think about it. And there are a couple escape squares that he has there. So somehow our final move needs to take away those two squares and of course also attack the king where he sits. The final move needs to take away all three squares there. The best way to do a puzzle like this, I think, is to just look at your different checking moves. You could check by capturing either of these two pieces. If you capture the bishop, the king could just capture you back. If you capture the rook, the queen or the king could capture you back. Those are possibilities. The other check, simply rook captures on f1, is the one that I really like. That's actually the first one that I saw. But if you capture that rook, it does take away those three squares. So a very attractive move right off the bat. And when the bishop captures us back, then, which you would be forced to do, that's the only move that would protect the king. The bishop would have to capture back. Queen can drop to e1, defended by the knight for checkmate. We always want to be looking at checking moves. So you should imagine the different checks first. And the first one that came to mind for me was simply rook takes rook. So rook takes f1. If that happens, we can go ahead and sacrifice our rook here, but when they capture, that's checkmate in two. Awesome. This concludes our video on how to find checkmates. Please go to the bottom right corner there, that little red box, and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're interested in seeing more chess videos, as I will be posting at least one chess video every week. Thank you very much for watching and have a great week.